Hello, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Ron Bowers and Henry House. The Flipside starts right now. Welcome to the show. So tonight we have the opportunity to hear about the recently completed Maryland legislative session without the lens of media at all. And I'm not considering us media. We're going to hear straight from a delegate that was involved and brought the bacon back to Washington County in a lot of cases, or at least helped push our advantage there. We'd like to welcome Delegate Paul Corderman. Paul, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
So given the current session, and I know there's a lot to talk about, but I would be remiss in not first talking about Speaker Mike Bush and your reaction, opinion to his passing.
So the session, ended obviously on a sad note. Speaker Bush was a pillar of in the House of Delegates of the Maryland General Assembly for many years, and it was a great loss to the state of Maryland, not only in the House of Delegates but for the entire state. I can't say anything but good things about Speaker Bush. He treated me fairly. He treated everybody fairly. He always had an open door. You could have a conversation with him, and you may not always agree, but he let the debate to be heard, and he let it to be fair. And at the end of the day, I think that's what's important, so everyone's concerns can be heard. And he passed away the day before Sine Die, the last day of the session, and it was a tremendous loss for the state of Maryland. So, but yes.
Excellent, thank you. So I've already seen some documents out there about wish lists for a next speaker. I know there are 3 candidates at this point. Is it likely that will change? Have you seen any of these wish lists? I know, was it the Teachers Association that published one? I can't remember. I
haven't seen any wish lists per se. I've seen probably the same information you've seen as far as reading the paper, as far as the 3 delegates that are vying, so to speak, to be the next speaker. That would be Maggie McIntosh from Baltimore City, Adrian Jones from Baltimore County, and Derek Davis from Prince George's County. So, there's going to be a special session which will convene here pretty soon, here in about a week, and a new speaker will be chosen after that. So it's kind of to be determined at this point.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this current session, and I know you have some things you want to bring up, but I'm going to throw it to Ron and see if there's any specifics he wants to get into.
I want to go back to Bush.
Sure.
I want to go back to the 42 votes that the GOP has. And they say they're going to vote as a bloc.
We always vote as a bloc.
Okay. But will they? Will they all stick together for one particular person?
I think they will. I mean, again, as I said, I think generally on both sides, whether it's the Democratic side or the Republican side, generally in Annapolis you'll see a lot of, party call votes, so to speak. So, the GOP made an agreement within ourselves on Sine Die that we would, vote as a bloc, as you said, and whoever that candidate may be is, again, to be determined.
So what do they need, 71?
72, excuse me, because it's 141, yep.
And you served on a committee with McIntosh, is that
Correct.
accurate?
I did. She's the chair of the Appropriations Committee, and that's the committee I served on this year.
Did you get things done in appropriations?
I did. I feel like I did. I think all the candidates, whether it's Maggie, Adrian, or Derek, I think they all had the same goals and ambitions. I think that we do at this table. They want to see what's best for the state of Maryland. I think we all have different ideas of how we get there. But at the end of the day, I think everybody wants the best for the entire state. One Maryland, so to speak.
Going forward, when we were down to the coalition, there was a lot of, the day that we had the coalition, a lot of talk of a really bad budget year next year for the state of Maryland. Do you see that coming?
Oh, yeah.
How's that going to affect back home here?
So, I mean,
because they received it this year. They've wound up with income, revenue this year.
Sure,
that they didn't get.
That's right. There was a write-down this year during the session of approximately about $250 million or so. And the out years, there's a structural deficit. Sure, absolutely. So there's going to have to be some either tightening of the belt, so to speak, or I think the reality is, what you're going to see is there'll probably be tax increases in the state of Maryland. I mean, I think we've been fortunate under our current governor. In the budget this year, we have a balanced budget with no new tax increases. The governor has not had a tax increase in the 4 going on 5 years he's been there. But the reality is, not only the way the structural deficit is set up, but a lot of it has to do with the mandated spending that has been passed over the years and continues to get passed. And I mean, there's only so much money, so if we're going to continue to spend, it's either you're going to have to cut some money from some things, or you're going to have to generate additional revenue. And usually how you generate revenue in government would be, unfortunately, be raising taxes, fees, and that nature. So I think the reality is you're going to see that come in the next year or two.
So the big bear in the room is the Kerwin Commission.
Absolutely, sure. And you start talking about money, that's a big one. I mean, you're talking $4 billion with a B. That's big money. First Port of Kerwin passed this year. And I'll be the first to tell you, I supported and voted for Kerwin. And the reason I did a lot, and we'll see what happens going forward, is most of that has actually already covered the first phase of it. There was $200 million we set aside last year in the budget for it, and a significant portion of it comes from the Educational Trust Fund, which is the money comes from the lockbox to casinos. And I think we can all agree that was the intention of the casinos back.
Is that locked in now?
It is locked in.
It is locked in.
Yep.
Okay.
So what was passed this year was close to about $1 billion. 700 to 800 million is already accounted for. There's about 200 or 300 million that's got to be made up. But there's other things that we're looking for downstream that will close that gap, so to speak. There was a Wayfair tax that was passed this year. If you're familiar with that, it has to do with online purchasing and things of that nature. There's sports gambling they're talking about in the horizon. None of these things have happened yet, but there are ways to close that gap additionally. Now, you still got another $3 billion to go. So that's going to be interesting here. That's going to continue to be the bear in the room, like you said, going forward. So, again, Kerwin is great. I think all of us would agree we want what's best for our students, we want what's best for our educators, our schools, our communities, everything like that. However, when you start talking about money, you look back, I think you can probably remember this, I think we probably all do. You had the Thornton Commission years ago. Thornton Commission was kind of under the same premise. And around that time, education was around $2.5 billion. We're spending 3 times the amount of money that we were back during Thornton. Now, granted, costs have increased, understand that. We're spending 3 times the amount on education that we spent before. We have 5 counties in the state of Maryland that are in the top 10 counties in the entire country for spending per pupil, one being Baltimore City. And not to take a shot at Baltimore City, but those are some of the, have our most challenging schools and school system. Is additional money going to be the fix? Or are there other things we need to look at? I think Kerwin does a good job at looking at some of those other things. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from there.
So, in terms of the budget piece, we've been fortunate, I think, as a state, that we've been the beneficiary of a fairly booming economy here for some period of time now. How does that impact revenue? I mean, the Republican theory is that if you build a great economy, the revenue will follow. In your view, has that panned out?
Well, I think we've been fortunate not only as a county or the state. I mean, I think there was an article in the Herald Mail about the Washington County, the success they've had in economic development here recently. I think there's no question the state has been able to prosper here the past few years. Now, is that a direct result of the president or the governor or who have you or whatnot? But,
and I'm not suggesting anyone that is to blame or to benefit or responsible, but just the theory is if you build the economy, then that increases tax base.
Sure.
And is that the case?
Right. I think that is what has been happening. I think that's what we would like to see continue to happen, that way to increase the revenues. We're talking about raising revenue. If you increase the tax base, you'll have more revenue generated from the development. But everything's swinging. It's a pendulum. Things are going back. We've been on an upswing here for a good many years here now, and the reality is this isn't me. These are economists and things of that nature. Another recession is predicted. When it's going to happen, we're not sure, but it's probably the not too distant future, unfortunately. And things will have to be looked at and dealt with when that comes.
And we hope it's not as bad as the last one.
No, absolutely not. I mean, no one's advocating or wants to see a recession, but I think just the way economics seem to work is that you have the ups and downs and pitfalls along the way, and by no means we want to have the same situation we were into last time around.
Henry?
Question for as far as Washington County goes. We're saying about growing the tax base, which is obviously PG, Montgomery County. We see it trickling over into Frederick County. What are your thoughts in Washington County? Because we have a lot of people who are commuting down to D.C. to make it more accessible for them. I mean, Boonesboro obviously has benefited of the last, decade or so from, being a commuting community.
Right.
But to make Hagerstown sort of a, back to being a hub city.
Sure.
Okay. Where do you think that we can go with that?
So I think you bring up great points there, and I think it's not just Hagerstown. I think the whole Western Maryland region, quite frankly. If you look at the Western Maryland delegation, so the Western Maryland delegation in the General Assembly consists of Carroll County West. So you're talking about Carroll, Frederick, Washington, so on and so forth. You got about, I'm going to rough guess, about 700,000 people live in the Western Maryland delegation. That's more people than live in Baltimore City, okay? We should be able to get these same things, okay? We need to work and fight towards those same things, whether it's additional funding and resources in the STEM, trades, education, higher education, all those kinds of things. That's what I would really like to see, is our portion of the state be able to capitalize on that. I mean, we have just as many people, just as many ideas. You talked about Boonesboro and Keedysville. I read something, I remember it was a year or two ago. It just blew my mind away that the median income in Keedysville, median income is $95,000. That was like a year or two. It was reported in the Herald.
And median income for the area you represent in Hagerstown?
City Hagerstown's maybe $35,000, $40,000, somewhere around there. I have to double check.
Big difference.
Huge difference, And that's just a couple miles down the road. Now, a lot of it is, like you said, a lot of these folks are commuting up and down the road.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's what we need to do, is figure out a way and find a way and make it happen. And we can bring those jobs to Western Maryland. Because quite frankly, like I said, within those 5 counties, we should be able to do that. The 70 corridor out to 68, you got Frostburg State University all the way out there in the farthest parts of Western Maryland. You got the University System of Maryland here in Hagerstown. We have tremendous educational opportunities. I think it's something we really need to focus on going forward.
Absolutely. We're going to take a pause here. Stay with us. When we come back, Delegate Corderman will be with us for actually 2 more segments. So stay tuned right after the break. We're back with Delegate Paul Corderman to talk some more about the state of Maryland and the recent legislative session. Ron?
Delegate, you've been around for a good while, and you've been a city councilman. Very few people's had that luxury of sitting in the city council and then going on to be a delegate. You talked in the previous block about how we can we're a taker and not a giver in state revenue. We take. What do we have to do in Western Maryland to really get our act? Because I don't think we have our act together. I don't think we're close to having our act together, but we're not far. We've got a lot of good things.
Sure.
I know you roll your eyes there, Jim, but we have so much, but there's something that's holding us back not to really go to the next 2 levels. What do you see?
So, I think it's a great question. I don't think there's one single answer, because otherwise we probably already would have been there, done that. First off, I appreciate you bringing up my days on the city council. That was a great privilege to be able to represent the city of Hagerstown. As far as now where I am now here in the House of Delegates, and how do we really capitalize on the things I talked about really making a Western Maryland, to really grow and prosper in Western Maryland. It's relationship building. It's building those relationships. It's working with our administration. It's working with, our higher educational facilities, whether it's the Frostburg State University of Maryland, our local school system, the Board of Education, Dr. Michael. A piece of legislation that came out this year increased the amount of P-TECH schools that are allowed in the counties. And that's a great thing. We've gone through a lot of time here where, I'm college educated, and a lot of us are college educated, and college educations are a wonderful thing. But I think what we've forgotten about a lot is the trades. And we've forgotten about tradespeople and people getting involved in trades, and there's a significant amount of money to be made in trades. There's a trade center that was just opened out at the community college just last week. Secretary Schultz was able to come up here along with the Lieutenant Governor, and that's a great program. Again, with the P-TECHs, with getting the high school kids involved. So I think it's going to be a collaborative, effort across the board. But we have to have that conversation. We have to have that conversation now.
Do you see a point in time where the delegation from Carroll County West meet more with their elected bodies? Now, I feel you only meet twice a year max. Is that enough for the elected delegation to collaborate with their existing county councils, county co-government, or county commissioners form of government? At what point do you all step up and say, we need to be meeting to deal with these issues?
I welcome the opportunity to meet with any other of our other, colleagues, so to speak, other representatives, whether it's the county commissioners or the city councils and the municipalities here in Washington County. But you're right, I don't think we meet enough. I really don't think we do. I had the opportunity and privilege to meet with the city council a few nights ago. Senator Serafini and I did, to give them kind of an update of things that had happened, things of that nature. And we'll meet with them again generally, as a group towards the end of the year, right before we go into session. But as we explained when we went to the council today, that was a big thing that we talked about a couple different times, myself and the senator, as far as we want to hear from you. We're here to help. It's a team effort, you know what I mean? Everyone probably remember all the green signs around town last year, Together a Better Hagerstown. And that's just not a fancy slogan. We need to be able to work together here. We need to be able to work together as far as our city folks, our county folks, our state folks, and absolutely we should be meeting more. We should be having more conversations. And hey, all the conversations aren't always going to be, what everybody hopes for, but you got to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Henry?
You seem to have a good dialogue, obviously, because you served on the city council, but a good dialogue going back and forth in the city of Hagerstown. Recently we had the baseball stadium discussed. I'm not going to ask your position on that unless you're open, comfortable in giving that. But what can we do, for the city of Hagerstown? Sure. They have needs. Okay, we had center front page in Baltimore Magazine about some of the people who are living on the streets in Hagerstown, which sort of gives a black eye to us. And Hagerstown's much bigger than that. How do you see how do we promote this and draw people into our community to one, increase the tax base so we don't have to face other taxes, but also make Hagerstown better?
Right. Well, I think to answer your first question about the stadium, I was able to secure $300,000 for the next phase in the stadium study. Okay, now. Where the city council decides to go with it, that's up to them. And we made that very clear when I spoke with them initially, and we made it very clear when I spoke with them the other evening. That's going to be their decision. But I can tell you this, though, Henry, regardless of what side of the stadium discussion you fall on, I think we all owe it to ourselves to listen to any opportunity that can come about that could, reinvigorate, revitalize, bring more people to our core, bring more people to our city, and help energize and redevelop our city. Whether it's a stadium, whether it's an urban improvement project that's going on right now, whether it's expansion of the University of Maryland, whether it's student housing, or the arts. All these things that we've been focusing on, it's not going to be one project. The urban improvement project is a wonderful project going on right now. We're all able to keep up to speed with that, but Mr. Bowers over here keeps us great update here with his photos, which we're all very appreciative of. But all kidding aside, it's a wonderful project. It's the largest revitalization project in the history of downtown Hagerstown. Will that project in and of itself save Hagerstown? No, but it's another cog in the wheel. It's another thing that we can hang our hat on and move forward with. We have the Schmeckel Stube down the streets doing a significant renovation. Part of the reason they're doing that is because the renovation that we're doing there in the Arts and Entertainment District. So these things all tie into each other. We'll see where the stadium project goes. That's to be determined. The Stadium Authority, I believe, is coming next month to make their presentation to the City Council, and they'll have a decision to make at that point where they want to go. Like I said, we were able to secure some funding to cover that phase from the state level, so there'll be no additional funds needed from a local level, from a city level, and we'll see how it plays out there.
Senator Serafini was very direct about saying that he thinks that the success of a stadium project would involve significant private investment.
Sure.
And you talked about that a little earlier in the segment relative to some other. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. And just like any project, that's why the urban improvement project has been so successful from a community aspect, is everyone's got skin in the game. You have all the different levels of government, whether it's state, local, you got private investment, everything. So yes, if a stadium project is going to move forward, absolutely you're going to have private investment. You're going to have a committed owner. Okay, that's step number one. You need to have a committed owner and ownership group, and then you need to have support. Again, as any of these projects, again, the reason that the urban improvement project has been so successful is all the different entities that have been putting in, whether it's private, public-private, however you want to describe it. So you'll definitely need that in that project as well, especially something that magnitude.
Well, the theater in itself is $11.5 million.
Sure.
We raised that money. The governor was gracious, the county and the city's been gracious, but we had to raise $11.5
Sure,
million.
you've raised a lot of money too, absolutely, yeah.
So this is probably a good point to ask you to talk about some of the projects that you were involved in getting funded and that are in process or have been completed over the last year or so. on the behalf of the city or the county or the other municipalities. Can you talk?
Oh, absolutely. So we talked briefly about the funding for the stadium. Other things locally, we were able to get some funding for the local YMCA. The YMCA, I think I still call it the new Y. But what we all forget about, the YMCA is almost about 20 years old.
Yeah,
if you believe that. And so they're running into maintenance things as all things start to age, and we were able to secure a $150,000 grant from the state to help them with their HVAC system out there. Out there. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial here in Hagerstown. That was a project I was involved with when I was on the city council. As far as when I say when I was on the city council, granted them the land. Governor Serafini, or excuse me, not Governor, Senator Serafini.
Is that an announcement?
No. Senator Serafini and I, were able to work towards getting them some additional funding, which helped them out. The ARC here, it's in the city limits here in Hagerstown. They're getting ready to go under a capital campaign. There's about $500,000 that was earmarked for the ARC. So those are just a couple of things there that we were able to address here within the city of Hagerstown. Trying to think if there's anything else off the top of my head. Those were the main ones here, at least for the district and 2B, so to speak.
Okay, great.
So,
Henry?
We've also had the discussion about the technology corridor and the bridge going across.
Sure.
And of course that would be some state funding, I believe, stepping up into that. The expansion of I-81 that we have partially funded but not completely funded. Which is, some of it depends on what happens down in Washington D.C. and their allocations. But where do you see it going? What's your compass saying to you that?
Well, I think transportation, and I think the 81 project is top of the list and has been for quite some time. And I think the fact that at least we've started to build it, I think will only help us in the future, because I think people will see that, hey, we're almost done phase one. You just can't stop there. A lot of it does depend on some federal funding, the infra grant, that the state has applied for. But ultimately, I think you'll see it go all the way up to the Pennsylvania border. Obviously the big question is how long that's going to take. But that is, if not, I would say it is the top transportation project, in our part of the state, and rightfully so. I mean, we all see the terrible.
Now, how do you see that opening up, providing more opportunities in our communities, aside from relieving some stress that we have on 81?
Sure.
Are we going to get more warehouse facilities in, manufacturing? Sure.
I mean, it can help towards all that. Now, keep in mind, we're competing with that I-81 corridor, which is West Virginia and Pennsylvania.
Right.
So that's a challenge in and of itself. Not just the road's going to be great, but we're going to have to work on some incentives to entice those companies to come here. I mean, Procter & Gamble, I know we made a big leap after them, so to speak, and unfortunately they ended up in West Virginia, and there's places in Pennsylvania right across from Franklin County that have quite frankly kind of been eating their lunch here most recently, but we're hopeful that we can begin to compete with those other counties. So
stay with us. We're going to take a break here, but after the break we'll be back with more with the delegate. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're here with Delegate Paul Corderman again, talking about the recently completed legislative session in Maryland. Paul, we talked about some good stuff, but
Sure.
I'm sure not every piece of legislation that came across for a vote was fully embraced by our Western Maryland delegation
Sure.
or you. Can you talk about some of the things that you would perhaps not have liked to pass?
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I would say that the most significant piece of legislation that's really going to affect us here in Western Maryland was the Fight for 15, as it was commonly referred to.
AKA minimum wage.
Minimum wage,
Yeah.
okay? First and foremost, I think we all can agree that we want people to earn a good and fair wage, okay? Now, where government's involvement in that begins and ends is open to discussion as far as, whatever different people's ideologies are. The issue I have with it here, specifically here in Western Maryland, we talked about I-81. We talked about that I-81 corridor, okay? We are 5 or 6 miles in the other direction from either one of those states that have a minimum wage of $7.25 and $8.75, respectively. I'm not advocating saying that's a proper wage, but that's just the reality of what their wage is. Our wage is going to be nearly double that, okay? Baltimore City looked at increasing their minimum wage to $15 minimum an hour a few years ago. And you know why they didn't do it? They said it would cost too much and would put them at a competitive disadvantage to their neighboring counties. Our neighboring counties are other states that have that different wage. Baltimore City's on board with it now because it's a statewide bill. Their neighboring counties will all be included in that.
Right.
So I think that's going to be a significant issue here with us here in Western Maryland. Now that's being phased in. It's not all going to happen at once. It's going to be about 75 cents to $1 every year for the next 5, 6, 7 years. If you have a
15 or less.
15 or less, yeah, place employment 15 or less, you get an extra year. But there were by far and away more businesses, probably I'd guess 2 to 1, that came to Annapolis, including from our area here in Washington County, that came to Annapolis and testified within the committee of the realities of what this will do to their business, where they will either move or they will have to change up as far as the number of employees they have. What a big thing is benefits, what the companies offer. The money's going to have to come from somewhere. Either they're going to have to raise their costs to cover some of this, or they're going to have to take back from their employees they have already as far as reducing some of their hours and benefits and things of that. So,
or replace with technology.
Or replace with technology. Now, the technology thing, I think we all, that's coming, I think, regardless. But I do agree with that to some extent. I think we all go to the grocery stores to see more and more checkout lines, things like that. But I think that would probably continue to happen. But I have a grave concern as how this legislation is really going to affect us here in Western Maryland. And the Eastern Shore have the same concerns as well because they have Delaware right beside them.
One of the things that Ron and I have argued about, we'll say discussed,
Sure.
is because Ron and I are on opposite sides of this issue. Is that fair to say, Ron?
Yes.
But one of the concerns that I have, and I think Ron shares this, is how do you measure success? If how do we measure whether this thing was actually a good thing or a bad thing? What is that measurement process? I can't figure that out.
Yeah, I don't think there's a definite answer to it. I think you're going to see over the years as far as what businesses may or may not relocate, what businesses may come or not. I don't know if there is a real true barometer, so to speak, that you're going to be able to see that. But I don't see how it's going to help us.
Yeah. The other question I had, and there was somebody on the floor, I'm not sure who it was, but one of the delegates or maybe one of the senators gave an impassioned discussion on the floor about the cliff and the fact that as you raise the minimum wage, people may not qualify for some of the social programs that they qualify for today.
Delegate McKay, our own delegate here in Washington County, actually brought that up on the House floor. So I'm not sure if there was someone who brought that up in the Senate as well, but no, that is a concern because they're going to be priced out per se of some of the programs that they're in right now. So no, that is definitely a concern for those folks.
What are some of the other ones that you would rather have not seen?
Just go by this?
I think Mr. Bowers has something he wants to throw in here. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see what your point is. As an economic development person, you've got Anibal Basu from the Sage Company, who is also the president of the board of directors of Medco, that speaks to the chamber every year, telling us that he cannot understand why we're not at the catalyst of the #1 economic power on the I-81 corridor. I can't, my disagreement with you is I don't want to see us bringing $15 an hour jobs here.
Nope.
That's not what we're after.
Right.
Any company worth their weight is paying far more than the $11.10 that they're getting now and going to be paying. Who are we trying to keep out of here? My philosophy is, which is short, you're going to have a far better work base, and people's not going to be moving all the time somewhere else, and you're going to get more done because people's not leaving their jobs. Because they're getting paid a wage they can live on.
No, and I agree with those sentiments as far as that was part of the in our previous block we talked about really focusing on the Western Maryland as the STEM programs, the trades, those natures of jobs that, $15 an hour minimum wage, it's a minimum wage, okay? I don't think any of us want to see someone make a minimum wage.
Per capita income, what state's #1?
Per capita income?
Yes.
Well, I couldn't tell you that right off the top of my head.
Okay, it's Maryland. And if we're going to grow here, we can do the same thing Frederick's doing. Why aren't we? You brought that up a little bit ago. We should be, but we're not. And I asked you, what are we missing we're not doing? Fighting the minimum wage, to me, keeps good people away.
Well, I think the minimum wage is also going to keep some of our businesses away as well. So time will tell.
Henry, anything on the minimum wage?
No, I mean, my argument is similar to what yours is, Jim, is that, businesses may choose to automate, they may choose to relocate. So the jobs that Ron is purporting will stay, that people will come to Maryland and work for, may actually go across state boundaries, or the jobs might become obsolete because the $15 minimum wage just prices them out of the market, so those jobs won't materialize.
The other piece that I keep coming back to, and this is I know this is a big issue politically, but the reality is this is 2.6% of the population nationally that's affected by this.
So what's the argument?
And the fact of the matter is, despite what you read in the newspapers and hear on some of the TVs, the majority of them are either school age through college age that are affected by this, or retirees that are affected by that. So,
But it's not just the private business, though, either. I mean, you talk to the county commissioners. How much do you think this is going to cost the county, raising the minimum wage with some of their workers?
None.
Oh, I beg to differ on that one.
What about the people who are the
beg to differ
lifeguards
on
at the
that.
pool? What about the
Well,
people
then,
who oversee
county
our
doesn't have a
county
pool.
parks?
County doesn't have a
Well,
pool.
the city does.
All right.
Okay, but I'm just thinking, is that part-time people, or are they covered?
Because it's not just the minimum wage. You get the guy now who's making $17 or $18 an hour. You raise the minimum wage to 15. You think that guy's going to be happy at 17
We said
or
the
18?
same thing years ago when we were 362. I mean, it just keeps.
And the guy who was
tell you.
making 5 wanted to make 6. So the
we're
argument's still
there.
valid.
We still got a problem.
well, we've reached our limit on the minimum wage coverage. What else would you like to have not seen come past your desk this term?
That was the big one. We talked about Kerwin a little bit, but I supported Kerwin this go around. We'll see where it goes going forward. There was the I'm trying to think what the other big hot ones that
Death with dignity.
Death with dignity was a very controversial one. So I was in the Senate, ended with a member not voting, unheard of. House rules say if you are on the floor, you are required to vote, cast your vote, yay or nay. It was a very close vote in the House. I think it was 74 to 66, if I'm not mistaken, which is, it's only about three people would have flipped one way or another. And in the Senate, it was deadlocked. And there was Senator Patterson, Prince George's County, refused to vote.
Couldn't he vote present?
He just refused to vote. Never been seen before.
Ooh, wow.
Exactly. So that bill, in essence, died on the floor because it was a tied. But yeah, very, very controversial. Depending on where you fall on things, that's a tough one. It is a really, really tough one because, you hear these stories from folks. I mean, there was impassionate pleas that were made by different delegates during that, when that bill was discussed on the floor, about loved ones that have gone through, extreme pain one way or another, and they would have liked to have that option. And you have folks on the other side that believe, and rightfully so, and understandably so, of different things. So, I voted against that bill personally, and I'll be honest with you of why I did. To be honest with you, is that whatever religious aspects people have and things of that nature, we're all going to face our Maker at some point in time, whoever that may be. My biggest concern with this, to be honest with you, is the healthcare and the healthcare system. Okay, we have an issue here with our healthcare system nationally, and if you ask anyone that talks about health insurance and health insurance companies, things of that nature, I would think generally, from at least the feedback I get, people don't really trust the insurance company. You have someone who's terminally ill, 6 months, a year, who, first off, you can't really say how long they have. That's kind of a guesstimation, but that's in the bill. It's supposed to be a determining factor of how long they had to live, which I don't really think that can really be quantified. You have a prescription that's available for $5,000 that's going to, end someone's life. Or you're looking at $500,000, $1 million of care over the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it may be. If people don't think that insurance companies would have a hand in that, I think they're naive. And I think that could be a tremendous, a terrible, terrible thing for folks to go through. And I just, just couldn't bring myself to support that.
So Jack Kevorkian lost in the state of Maryland.
He did. Jack Kevorkian lost. Now he made it farther than he ever has before. This vote, I believe, it was the 4th time that's been here in recent years. First time it actually made it to the floor, and barely made it out of the House, but it did. And then died in the Senate at basically a tiebreaker. So I would imagine it'll come back again.
Probably not in this 4 years.
You never know. I mean, there's a lot of leadership changes. Like we talked about Speaker Bush earlier. President Miller has been there for a long time. At some point in time, I'm sure he'll be moving aside. So, there's a change. There's a lot of change going on, not only in Annapolis and within those folks, but I think within the parties themselves. Whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, there's just a lot of change within the parties and ideologies going forward. So
we have about 2 minutes left. Let's get into the future a little bit. Let's talk about legislative priorities from your perspective going forward. What will be your legislative priorities for next year?
Well, I think a big one is, as we talked about a couple of times here, is finding a way, and what that answer is, it's to be determined. We're going to work on that, of how we can really take Western Maryland to the forefront. These 5 counties from Western Maryland, because I think, Ron, you brought up a very good point in our discussion about minimum wage. We should be striving for jobs that pay more than minimum wage to begin with. And the way that we do that is to come together as a collective unit. I mean, we have 700,000 people live in Western Maryland, what's called the Western Maryland Delegation. And we have all these resources there available. We need to be continuing to push those objectives to be able to really make, Western Maryland, a destination for whether it's education or trades or job creation of those things that we haven't had. Because there's no reason that the amount of people we have in this area shouldn't be seeing the same, things that we see in other parts of the state. So,
Ron, anything on?
I was going to ask him a question right up. We've outlawed fracking, but yet nationally we want to limit the fight against pipelines. Were we right to not allow fracking, which would bring in far more money in Western Maryland?
I don't think that we should have banned fracking, if that's what you're getting at. No, I don't think we should have banned that at all. I think that was before my time in the state in the legislature, but I would have voted to not ban that. The pipeline has been contentious here as far as under the Potomac River.
Right.
I don't know the exact numbers, but my understanding there's about 15 or so pipelines already under the Potomac River. Baltimore City's got a pipeline by BG&E going right through it. You don't hear anybody talk about that. The reality is whether you are for fossil fuels or against fossil fuels, that's what we have right now. We need to continue to invest in alternative energies, absolutely. But to just say we're going to cut them off right now, it's not feasible. It's just not.
Henry, any questions on future stuff?
What are your legislative priorities going into next year? I know it's 9 months away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I know one specifically, and it was kind of falling. We were talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly earlier.
Right.
And I would say the ugly was one that failed, didn't make it through. It was a bill that I sponsored. It was the Suzanne Jones Act in relation to released inmates from our correctional facilities. As we're all aware, we got 3 correctional facilities just south of town, and over the years we have found we have a disproportionate amount of individuals that are not from Washington County originally. But when they're released from those prison facilities, come into Washington County. Upwards to the way of about 70% of the inmates that are released into our county are not from our county to begin with. And that's not to say that they're all bad or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But we don't have the proper resources to be able to support them to begin with. If someone gets out of jail and you're talking about reentry, Bill Gardner does a great job down at Gatekeepers.
Right.
Yeah, tremendous job. I mean, you're talking the amount of people and the Goodwill folks. Obviously, Goodwill does a tremendous job with reentry, and it's just we can't sustain that type of population influx. If you look at the numbers of what Washington County itself has actually grown in a couple of years, compare that to the amount of inmates that have been released.
You can tell why we've increased.
It's scary.
Yes,
it's very scary. So, that bill, we presented that this year in the Judiciary Committee. It did not receive a vote. Now, they didn't vote it down, but they didn't vote it forward. Suzanne Jones, if everyone's aware, was a young woman from the city of Hagerstown who unfortunately was murdered by Jack Lee Phillips, who was a released inmate from our correctional facilities, had no ties to our community. Unfortunately, he fell back into the life that he lived before, and brutally stabbed Miss Jones on Cleveland Avenue about a year and a half ago. So we're going to bring that bill back. We're going to work and try to tweak it a couple different ways. We had a lot of local support. Mayor Brucci, Sheriff Mullendorf, Police Chief Kiefer, Assistant State's Attorney Joe Michael, Court Minor. So we had a lot of locals that came down and supported on behalf of the bill. And we'll keep pushing that. So that's something that you'll see again from us here going
But your
forward.
metropolitan area is going to fight you because they don't want them back. They're
You're
already
absolutely
rid
correct.
of them,
You're right.
and they
Well,
don't want them back.
And if you look where most of these prison facilities are, they're in the rural areas,
In the
so
rural
to speak, because
areas.
they are sold to us as an opportunity for employment.
Yeah.
And that's great. The employment opportunities are great. Now, that in itself is an issue, too, because we are significantly understaffed at our correctional facilities. We can't hire enough people. We can't retain enough people. But we have 3 facilities in Washington County, and there's 2 in Allegheny County.
Right.
And then there's ECI on Eastern Shore. That's 6 of them. 6 of the major prisons are in the rural areas. And of that population, I believe, I'd have to go back and look at it again, but it's about 19,000 prisoners that are incarcerated in the state of Maryland. About 11 or 12,000 are within those 6 prisons.
So then why don't the delegates that oppose it give you the money to deal with the issue?
Well, that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
That's what we're working on.
Last question. Larry Hogan, Governor Hogan.
Sure.
Presidential run.
Sure.
What are your thoughts?
I can't speak for the governor. I mean, I see the same things that you guys see. I mean, he was in New Hampshire here most recently. I think he's testing the waters to see if that's an opportunity that he wants to move forward with. But I think it's a wait-and-see type of thing.
I think it would be an interesting circumstance if he
Sure.
decided to run.
My
interesting.
prediction is that is slim to none going to happen.
Well,
He's got a
maybe
good
in
place
2020.
where he is to get into a dogfight like that in the middle of his his tenure here. He wants to finish out 4 good years in Maryland, as he had 4 good years.
He did have 4 good years,
Yep.
and he's going to have 4 more, in my opinion. But
Well, yeah,
that's-
and I mean, from a selfish perspective, I'd hate to see him leave the state of Maryland. I think he's done a tremendous job for our state. He's been obviously a great friend to us here in Western
Yes.
Maryland. I think we can all agree that we've seen Governor Hogan more than any governor in recent time, regardless of the party affiliation of whoever was the governor. So I think he definitely kept his word that he was going to pay attention to Western Maryland. I believe he has.
he absolutely has.
He proved that 23 counties, or 21 counties can beat 3.
We'll give you the last word on that one, Ron. Coming up next, 3 panelists, 5 topics, 7 minutes. Fast 5. Stay tuned. Welcome to Fast 5, where our 3 panelists talk about 5 topics in 8 short minutes. Let's get it started. So, Henry, the county is making changes to the pension plan. What do we know about that?
Well, the pension plan, I believe from what I read, they're not changing the vesting period, which is still going to be
5
5 years.
right.
But I think ultimately it's to benefit the county in the long range.
And this impacts new employees or existing?
It's going to impact the new employees coming in. I didn't pick up, I scanned the article before I came to the show tonight, so I didn't pick up about the whether the existing people or.
Yeah. Ron, good idea, bad idea?
It's going to help recoup about $1 million so that the 58% that's currently there for the fund, which is at about, I forget what the amount is, but they need to be up to around $117.8 million. They need to shore that up more for retirements. So that's kind of why it's being done. The key point was there was a floated deal of 10%, of 10 years,
Okay.
being vested after, we'll wait for 10 and not 5, and that was shot down. And because, if that would have happened and that would have gone in with the sheriff's department, his ability to attract new officers or uniformed folks would have been totally just demoralized.
5 years is still a long vesting period.
It's kind of average.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've seen a lot of companies use 5 years as a vesting
Yeah.
period.
Okay. I mean, so some of the companies I've looked at are, they're 2 years or 2
I've
to
seen
3
that
years.
too.
Yeah.
It depends on, it depends on how much they want. I mean, that's clearly an advantage.
And new people coming in will go from 60 to 62
Right.
with 30 years service. And that's a pretty big deal. And then they did away with that in-service retirement, which I called the Greg Murray retirement plan, which dealt you could retire and start. You were still working, and you said, "I'll be out of here in 5 years, but I'm going to collect part of my retirement as I work."
Yeah.
So they've done away with that. That was smoke and mirrors, and it's something I think has been long overdue that they've dealt.
It's good for the county.
I think it's really good for the county. And then, did you notice every vote? I think it was almost a 3-2 vote.
Yeah. Yeah. Wayne Kiefer was the deciding on several of them, as I understand it.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it's not everybody agreed on all of them.
Yeah.
I think Michael Schmidt and Wagner agreed on 6 of the 7.
Yes, I think you're right. All right. Rochester Drug is to pay $20 million in the first criminal opioid case. Key here, criminal opioid case. Ron, what say you?
I think it opens the floodgates for what can happen with people that's had an issue with some type of a class action suit or some kind of suits, individual suits that can now be brought since the problem has been uncovered and they've been charged.
So you think this is the equivalent of a breach in the dam, similar to linking cigarette smoking to cancer?
Yes. Or asbestos.
Do you think, okay, so what I'm hearing is you think this is a good thing that this happened?
Well, I think it's a good thing. Look at the amount of people, 130 people a day dying because of opioids, and because they didn't tell what who controls MDF?
But my major question here is, the people who are dying because of opioid abuse, are they being prescribed or are they sourcing it from illegal means? Because a lot of the doctors, at least from people who I know in the medical field, go the extra yard to try not to overprescribe these medications, especially in today's environment.
Well, I don't know. Maybe the medications aren't slow release. Maybe they get out into the system like really quick. So, however it is, they made a pill that is ingested by the person that is being addictive and killing 130 people a day.
Well, coffee is addictive too.
Well,
But it probably doesn't kill 130 people.
No, no.
so is it addictive? I hope so.
Unless someone's drinking their coffee while they're driving.
Well, that's-
to get
I mean, you're
distracted.
not there with an intravenous needle with the hooked
Some
up to
people
your-
are halfway there.
with your Mr. Coffee.
All right. Border militia they had trained to assassinate President Obama and Secretary Clinton, and apparently just brought this out in the open. Number one, why would you train? Well, this just has all kinds of crazy written on it for me. Ron?
That's what kills people. All kind of crazy involved in something.
Yeah.
Was there something? Was there something at Ruby Ridge? Was there something at other places? What were they doing? It's been a plot that's uncovered. You missed George Soros. He was part of that, and I can understand those are 3-4 people that are disliked by certain people in the country. They will always be disliked.
Yeah, and there's equal on the Republican side. I'm sure there are, it's part of the whole, I think, culture at some level for those who just want to take the political thing to an extreme level.
Well, it's extremist.
Yeah.
And I don't know that extremist has a mantra, left or right. I think there's extremists on both sides.
I agree.
I agree wholeheartedly with you, Ron. I mean, they trained, they didn't commit, fortunately, okay?
Yeah.
There is no way to condone any type of action, whether it's bombing an abortion clinic to save lives or to train to assassinate a former First Lady and Secretary or the President or even a very well-to-do individual or even the guy who lives a couple blocks down the street. Why in the world do you do it? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
To take any life is wrong.
All right. Here's a high point for a school in Ohio. 17 students from one school got a perfect score on the ACT exam. ACT, by the way, is a college entrance exam. Henry, what say you?
Was Lori Loughlin involved with any of those?
Or Felicity Huffman.
Yeah,
think so.
I think it's, that's very impressive, and I believe it's 0.1% scores perfect on the ACT.
Right.
The fact that they had that number, and then they had multiple students who only missed one question. So are they teaching to the test there at the Ohio school?
We don't know.
Or did somebody have a copy of the test scores?
Oh, Ron, you're so subversive.
Yes, I mean, and
Here
why,
comes the conspiracy
and why
theories.
why did they name each one of the kids by name in the article?
Yeah, I don't know.
That was a little disturbing when I read that.
Yeah. I think it's a proud moment though for the school that they had 17 students earn a perfect score on the ACT exam. I will assume that there was no problems with getting tests behind the scenes.
You don't think any test scores that anybody had the test scores and passed them around?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to check handwriting analysis on bubble tests.
Yeah. All right. All right, last up, Saudi Arabia holds a mass execution. 37 people executed in different locations, all in the same day. One person, this was the one that really got me, one person was actually crucified. Henry?
The way and manner in which it was done really brings concern in my book. It's if they're seeking out against the state. The strength to any society is the ability to have freedom of speech.
Right.
Okay, this was actions taken against people who stood for women's rights.
Right.
People who voice displeasure possibly in their government or in a religion of any source. It's wrong. And I think our federal government, even though Saudi Arabia is considered a close ally, I think our federal government, at least through back channels, needs to exercise some
Counseling?
counseling. Maybe not necessarily with the counseling consulting that our current administration does, but we need to have some people who say this isn't what a good nation does.
Yeah. Ron?
And we're supporting. We're so close with Saudi Arabia. Why?
And you know, that's been Democrat and Republican alike.
Yeah,
What is
well,
the deal with that?
Maybe it's something with 3 letters.
Oil.
Oil. Yes.
But we produce more oil than they do.
Right. But it hasn't always been that way, but we've sure kept the friendship, even though I'm not sure that the friendship's not very much one-sided.
And Khashoggi, the guy that was killed, that we've done nothing.
Well,
No sanctions on Saudi Arabia.
think about the
nothing.
strategic location of Saudi Arabia.
I get that.
Okay.
I get that.
But there has to be a point in time, if we did something like that, the entire world would be erupting. If we had a mass execution of people who disagree with our current president,
Yeah.
the entire world would be erupting. Ron, you would agree with that?
Yeah. All right.
How do you know who's fighting who now?
Yeah.
Well, hard to know.
I mean, over there, I mean, you've got dissidents.
You have sects within their own, whatever, religious belief they have, majority Muslim, but they have different sects, just like Christians have different religions that
But do
they
you
worship.
notice that bombings do not discriminate on who they bomb?
No.
They bomb Muslims, they bomb Christians, they bomb everybody. Okay? Everybody's bombed from ISIS. They don't discriminate on who they're going to bomb.
Doesn't seem that way. That's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you will follow us on Twitter. We hope you will send us your comments, suggestions, and feedback to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. We hope you will also join us next week for another trip to the flip side. Good night.
Focus TV, Smart TV.